Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, November 18th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sam Quinones, author of The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. Meanwhile, the House will begin debate on the Build Back Better social spending bill today, and information from the almighty CBO score keeps trickling out, and it's looking like the child care and universal pre-K programs may actually cost less than expected, so Manchin should be running out of excuses.
Time for a new excuse.
Yeah, he'll find some more.
Constitution.
Some more inflation. The Senate has advanced the bloated NDAA, despite objections and no votes from Sanders, Warren, Booker, and Markey. Weird that, no votes from the libertarian types like Mike Lee and Rand Paul, huh? So they will pair it with a China competitiveness bill. So, extra funds for the Pentagon with a side of Cold War propaganda just for kicks. The House has formally sanctioned Representative Paul Gosar for the anime edit he tweeted out, which depicted him killing AOC and attacking Biden. Just 2 Republicans joined Democrats in voting yes, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. There was 1 Republican who voted present, but... Julius Jones, a black man sentenced to death, is set to be executed today, despite serious doubts about his guilt. He'll be executed unless Oklahoma's Republican governor stays the execution. More on that at the top of the show after this. 2 of the 3 men convicted of killing Malcolm X in 1965 have been exonerated after spending 2 decades in prison. The Manhattan DA's investigation found that the FBI and NYPD, shocker, withheld evidence that likely would have led to their acquittal. But DA's investigation did not release more materials about the FBI's involvement, however, Might want to know a little bit more about that.
Or just move on.
Yeah. And lastly, I should say, if you work in the DA's office and you want to release those materials to the media, please do. And lastly, the over 10,000 John Deere workers that were striking have ratified a new 6-year contract after walking off the job in mid-October. They declined the first 2 offers. This is the 3rd. Wages will be raised and payment ceilings for performance will be raised as well as giving workers a traditional pension. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have a great show for you today. Sam is out on Thursdays, but I am here to hold down the fort and, do a little bit of the stories that I think are most important, lead with those. This Julius Jones case, I feel like, maybe we dropped the ball a little bit and not talking about it more, given the fact that he is set to be executed at 4 p.m. today. For people who are unfamiliar, Julius Jones was convicted when he was 19 years old. Republican Kevin Still is the governor in Oklahoma, and there have been repeated calls on him to stay this execution. So Jones was sentenced to death around 20 years ago for the murder of Paul Howell, who was a white man. It was an attempted carjacking. Paul was killed, and the family of this man continue to claim that this is the right person, Julius Jones, even though his daughters are speaking out. They were children at the time, but they are convinced that it is him and that he should be executed. Which, by the way, you know, people say, oh, if you had a family member who was murdered, you'd want to kill that person and beat them to death with their bare hands. That's not always the case. I mean, I just watched this documentary about the victims of Ted Bundy, and a lot of the families of those victims, they felt uncomfortable by the idea of the death penalty, as you should. Yeah,
well, and it's also why we have law.
Yeah.
Like, we don't ask like, that's not how it works. But also, I would recommend people watch The Confession Killer. It's a Netflix documentary about Henry Lee Lucas, who confessed to hundreds of murders in the 80s. Basically, what happened was the Texas Rangers were using him to close any murder cases that they couldn't solve. And police departments from across the country started getting in on that action too. And the families literally came to believe that he was responsible, and that they looked at him as the image of, you know, what ruined their lives. And it's hard to come away from that reality, but
they become an avatar for your grief.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, what seemingly is happening in this case. So there was a co-defendant in this case. Again, Julius Jones, this was 20 years ago. He was 19 at the time. And the co-defendant, named Chris Jordan, told 3 cellmates, according to their sworn testimony, that he was the one that committed the murder. There were also discrepancies in the identification of Jones. He had a shaved head at the time, and the witness said that the assailant had 1 to 2 inches of hair, was wearing a bandana. So, I mean, there's
reasonable doubt right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasonable doubt, and that's enough. I mean, there's more evidence in Jones's favor, but even the Oklahoma Parole Board, who, you know, they're not liberal, lefty, Innocence Project types, who is, you know, the Innocence Project is involved in trying to stop this execution. They recommended that his sentence be changed to life in prison so that they could stay the execution, because they believe there's enough doubt in this case. This is why we should not have executions in this country. It's only there to satisfy the bloodlust for about half of our population. Honestly, this is, you know, the death penalty is still more popular than it should be, because as a law, there are always you have to make sure that the law is applied equally and that it's just, and there are always going to be people that fall through the cracks like this who probably did not commit this crime. There's also evidence that one juror reportedly referred to Jones by the N-word and said he should be taken behind the courthouse and shot during the trial. Obviously, overwhelmingly, the jury was white. 11 of the 12 jurors were white. And there were reports that the cop, when arresting him, referred to him by the N-word. There have been growing protests in this case. Celebrities like Baker Mayfield, weirdly, who's kind of conservative, has spoken out about this. But I think it's because of his OU connection. But Kim Kardashian, who's been involved in trying to exonerate these people, has spoken out about this. 1,800 Oklahoma students in 13 schools walked out yesterday in protest, and there were demonstrations at the state capitol like this one.
And just to cite that was from, who was that Twitter handle was cut off in the... Tyreek Baker.
Yes.
TBT.
And then there's also this powerful footage here that I want to show you of a pastor who chained himself to the fence outside the Oklahoma State Capitol building. He offered his life in Julius's place, and I think everybody should. You're gonna watch it because I'm gonna play it, but it's important to watch.
council over and over again. We killed the innocent. The time has come to stop killing people. I have offered, if the governor wants to simply kill another black man, who cares what black man it is? I've offered to die in place of Julius Jones and asked the governor if he would allow me to lie on that table and allow Julius Jones to go free. The time has come for a country occupied by intelligent people to stop killing in the name of justice. It is not justice, and it is not just. The way the laws of capital punishment are applied in the United States disproportionately impact people who look like me, people of color, people who do not come from families of wealth. I am here calling upon Governor Stitt to do the right thing. We've been told that he's waiting on a word from God regarding this matter. Who among us would think that God would say, okay, Governor, kill this man, when the Board of Pardons and Removal has suggested on more than one occasion that he be granted clemency? I'm here to help the governor make up his mind to set Julius Jones free or to grant him clemency. The man has been in prison half his life for a crime he says he did not commit, and others say he did not commit. That's why I'm here.
It's incredibly powerful. Pastor Marvin Morgan from Virginia. We know statistically that there's over 1%, some maybe 4% is the figure that sticks out in my mind, of death row inmates are innocent. And one person executed wrongly is too many. And that disproportionately falls on black people, as the pastor said there.
But like, even then, like, other countries have gotten rid of this, right? Like, without that, like, oh, look at it's, and maybe that, like, what worries me is, like, are we such a brutal country that, like, our racism and the reason we still have the death penalty are, like, part of the same thing, right? Because, like, Europe has got rid of this, like, and to me,
but that's what he says there, right?
Exactly.
He says, if you just want to kill a black man, take me instead. I mean, that's not going to happen, but the power of that gesture is important to point out.
Like, I don't understand how people can be pro death penalty. Like, it's just the myopicness of I think people in America. Like, look around you, or even just think through it, like, logically. Like, you
that's what I'm trying to do.
Killing people.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Like, but people, we just don't do it here, and it's really depressing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you point out, the death penalty as an extension of our systemic racism, is important, because no one's ever going to say it. And, you know, the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, is not going to say it. But implicit in these people's thoughts are, well, he was probably doing something bad anyway. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like, who cares?
Who cares, right?
Exactly.
He's not one of us. So who cares?
And it's like, you look at Australia, similar, like, British penal colony type of stuff, abolished the death penalty. Like, there's something about America, and, like, people commented on this for the entirety of our history, that we're, like, brutal and don't care about particularly certain human lives.
Yes. It's like part of this cowboy mentality too, right? Or conquer mentality.
Yeah, or like the burn the witch mentality.
Or that too. That's as old as America. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be joined by Sam Quinones, author of The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined right now by Sam Quinones, author of The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. Sam, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm really excited for our conversation because your last book, Dreamland, I mean, it really, I think, gave people a lot of the language that they needed to talk about the opioid crisis today, right? I mean, you were kind of prescient in that way in your reporting going across the country. Maybe we can even just start there, because so much of really even the first part of your book shows how omnipresent opioids are and how the opioid epidemic, not understanding the opioid epidemic does not allow you to truly understand the current fentanyl crisis, of course, but also how this country is relating to meth right now. So let's just start there.
Well, sure. I mean, what the opioid epidemic did was create a new population of opioid addicted folks, Americans, all across the country, because it was promulgated by pharmaceutical companies who pressuring doctors to prescribe, and doctors were all over the country, and doctors all over the country bought into the idea that they could now prescribe narcotic painkillers, morphine, but also branded ones, Vicodin, Percocet, of course, OxyContin, without any risk of running of addiction for those folks who were pain patients. This idea was not supported by science, but nevertheless was essentially accepted, taught in medical schools, et cetera. And so over about a 20-year, 15 to so year period, we saw this enormous increase in supply all across the country from prescriptions, from doctors prescribing to people. And then, of course, a lot of that leaked out into the black market, and you found black market for pills in pretty much every region of the country. They were expensive on the street, $1 a milligram usually. Folks were up to that point by doing 150, 200 milligrams a day. They couldn't sustain that. And when they did, they switched to heroin. And when they did that, the Mexican trafficking world, which had really ignored heroin for a long time, sat up and took notice and began trafficking that. That population has existed, continues, and continues actually to grow. And that population is really probably the first driver of the folks who are using fentanyl. And the reason traffickers in Mexico figured out fentanyl was they saw, gee, this is a growing population. It's so much cheaper, easier, less risk. We don't need land to make synthetic drugs like fentanyl instead of growing poppies, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what led us into the fentanyl issue that we're dealing with today, and the methamphetamine as well. Yeah.
So what was the difference that you really saw when your book Dreamland came out in 2015, and fentanyl is just everywhere now? I mean, right. How stark was it when it in comparing your research for your first book with your current book?
Well, it's a radically different scene. What is the same, though, is an interesting thing, that the supply of drugs is almost comparable. And with the pharmaceuticals, painkillers, you saw just an amazing coverage. West Coast to East Coast, really intensely in some states, certainly, particularly in the Midwest and Maine, New Mexico, Oregon, various places like that. But nevertheless, you found them all over the country. And now we've seen the underworld take over that role. The doctors have stepped back, pharmaceutical companies are chastened, and you're not seeing the heavy promotion, sales force promotion that you used to see for narcotic painkillers, and doctors' offices is nearly as much as you used to, barely at all, I think. And so now, but we opened that Pandora's box. We created that consumer market with that enormous supply of pills. And then the underworld stepped in. And when they did, they made a transition. They were already in the middle of, but they really with a vengeance, again, switching from plant-based drugs, which the Mexican trafficking world had grown up on, marijuana and poppies, et cetera, away from that really towards synthetics, and the main ones being fentanyl and methamphetamine now. So it's a fascinating switch because there's a totally different source for what we see on the streets today, but the coverage is remarkably similar, so complete, you know, on the entire country. Something we've never really seen before is a homogenization of the drug offering all across the country, very much like what you see when you go across country, drive across country on the interstates. You see the same hotels, the same Burger Kings and McDonald's, the same gas stations, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost like they mimic corporate America in that, and that the same offering in New Mexico as in LA, as in Vermont, as in Columbus, Ohio.
And that's got to be, I guess, that's connected to the synthetic nature of it, right? I mean, let's talk a little bit about how, I mean, you touched on it there, but what I found so fascinating in your book was how the synthetic nature of these drugs change the supply chain as well. And then, of course, it makes it a lot easier to spread because the quantities are so small and so easily smuggable, particularly in fentanyl's case. But meth's always been synthetic, but the fact that there is this infrastructure for synthetic drug use probably allows for greater meth sales as well.
Yeah, the synthetic thing allows for the supplies that we're seeing today. So with synthetic drugs, you no longer need land. You no longer need rainfall, seasons, a large cadre of farm workers and harvesters and all that stuff. All you really need, you don't need land. What you need is shipping ports. And there are two shipping ports that are very important in the story on the western side of Mexico, Pacific coast, and near the drug producing regions, Sinaloa, Michoacan, those areas, and the chemicals. So shipping ports allow you access to the world chemical markets, and those chemicals have been coming in really in like container load quantities for several years now. Synthetic drugs also allow you to avoid seasons. The reason we've never seen this kind of supply before from, say, cocaine, really, or marijuana, for example, is that these things take a long time to grow. These plants take a long time to grow and they require certain seasons. With meth and fentanyl, you can make them all year round so long as you have the chemicals, which they do, and so seasons no longer matter. Again, as I say, all they really need are these chemicals. And what we're seeing now is just a result of that. It's like stunning, staggering quantities of this stuff coming through the ports into Mexico, and then from Mexico, it's made into the dope, and it's coming across into the United States and changing a lot about drug trafficking now. It's a remarkable, all the different ways that you're seeing. It's really democratized drug, certainly fentanyl. Now anybody can be a kingpin. Right? Yeah. Used to be that you needed that if you were a drug dealer on the street, one of your main concerns was, where am I going to get my dope? And people were always being arrested, sent to jail. You lose your connection, that kind of thing. That has been solved. The supply problem solves the dealer's main issue about where am I going. Now the big issue is, where do I sell all this stuff that I can get my hands on constantly all around me?
You tell a lot of stories in your book about, many different people that you spoke to, including a duo in China manufacturing fentanyl. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a great example of anybody can create fentanyl now.
Well, they were like, I didn't really speak to them, but they're part of a major case, and there's a lot on these folks. The Zhang father and son, and they went online by the name of Gordon Jin. They were really part, I think, mostly of the first wave of fentanyl in which chemical companies in China were providing straight fentanyl through the mails to folks here in the United States who saw it as like their lottery ticket. Oh my God, I can get this stuff. I can make huge profits. And they were one of the first ones to they had there were numerous cases involving the Zhangs or Gordon Jin as the name they use all across this country. Now they've been indicted and all, and they're not leaving China, so there's no way of getting them over here. But their story was an interesting one because it just showed you these guys were like country folk. The dad certainly seems like he was like a kind of a janitor, I think, for a while. But it shows you who can get rich. That, although has changed now. The Chinese no longer are sending fentanyl over in the mail. In fact, the supplies that we're seeing on the street now aren't really possible, never were possible when China was sending this stuff over in the mail. You just don't get to tons and tons and tons of this stuff the way we're seeing it now without, if it's coming through the US mail. It just doesn't arrive, it can't arrive in the quantities that we're seeing now coming up from Mexico, because that switched. It went from China producing it to China providing the ingredients and the Mexicans making it. That's what really accounts for the enormous quantities. They're right on our border. We have free trade with Mexico. We have millions of cars and trucks back and forth all the time. Our law enforcement doesn't have nearly enough time to check, I think, more than 5 or 10% of those things coming across. And so that's the way it's getting through our major border crossings, Tijuana, San Diego, Juarez, El Paso, those kinds of places. That would not have happened had the Chinese continued to just provide it via the mail.
What strikes me is how this new synthetic surge kind of reflects and adapts to our global capitalist structure, right? I mean, like, we're talking about supply chains right now and these backlogs in the United States and how that's contributing to inflation or what have you. I mean, a lot of this is raw material in China,
yes,
going to Mexico, and then the free trade agreements shipping to the United States. It's working within the very confines that, like, our neoliberal structure, frankly, has allowed.
And I think that that's one of the other interesting things that, absolutely true what you just said. And one of the other interesting things is that the traffickers in Mexico, you know, they grew up, the pioneers in all this were farmers, ranchers, unlettered folks, pretty simple folks, quick with a gun, but, you know, not too sophisticated, and never could have imagined themselves trading for chemicals in China or India or Hong Kong or wherever, you know. And now, of course, that's what being a drug trafficker really means. You're now a global trader in so many ways. And so, and that's what we're seeing now. It's because they're getting access to the efficiencies provided by the global economy of getting the chemicals from someplace, making it another place, shipping it to a third place. I mean, it's like any automotive supply chain almost.
Right. I guess I wanted to, I mean, we've mostly touched on fentanyl. I do want to get to meth, but I just find this so fascinating. I was not fully aware of the history of fentanyl, and I mean, how important it was for surgical procedures in its, when used correctly. Talk a little bit about its correct usage, and then, of course, how it got duplicated by people trying to make it for recreational use.
Well, it was invented in 1960 by Paul Janssen, one of the brilliant scientific minds of the 20th century, I think, in this world. And he invented this. It revolutionized surgery. All of us have benefited from fentanyl, just by the way surgery is now able to be done far more safely. I had a heart attack 4 years ago. They gave me fentanyl. I'm very happy that they did. It's a wonderful, wonderful drug when used medically, but Janssen and many other people always understood that the reason it was so effective was because it was enormously potent, and so you had to very carefully control for supply. And so the first fentanyl initially was only supplied to anesthesiologists in operating rooms. That was the only place you could get it. And strangely enough, those were the first people to ever get addicted to fentanyl, were anesthesiologists. I spoke to one or two about this was back in the 70s. Since then, you've seen certain amateur, underground, anonymous chemists produce the stuff in the United States. But the real key turning point came in a story I tell in The Least of Us, which is a lab that starts up in Mexico in the city of Toluca, run by an underground chemist who knows how to make it. He spent time in the United States, went to prison for fentanyl, gets out, is deported to Mexico. The Mexican citizen is deported to Mexico, and the Sinaloa cartel fund a lab for him. They wanted to make ephedrine, which at the time was the method for making, or the precursor for making meth. He thinks he's smarter than those guys. He says, "No, you don't know." So he starts to make fentanyl. They find out, they're a little upset, but then he explains to them, "This is the new thing. This is will give you profits you've never been able to achieve and with any other drug. And he was right. That was the first time. That was 2006. That lab was busted in 2006. But it's the fentanyl that first got out was shipped to Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Philadelphia, and it began killing people. There was a 10-month or so period when it just killed lots and lots of people. The first kind of fentanyl die-off really in our country's history. It was busted. That fentanyl petered out and wasn't seen again. But the Mexican trafficking world, particularly in Sinaloa, never forgot fentanyl. And so when the Chinese began to sell it, they were a major customer through the mails again. But this is all the way, it's fentanyl does not belong in the hands of traffickers. In the hands of traffickers, it becomes the disaster that we've seen. And of course, in the hands of dealers at the local level, it's a complete disaster. They don't know how to mix it. They can't sell it. You have to sell fentanyl mixed with other things because so little of it will get you high, and a little bit more than that will kill you. And so they mix it with other powders. For a while, they were mixing it in magic bullet blenders. That was the myth, that this is the best way to mix fentanyl, with those things you get at Target for $29.95 and infomercials. It's a great little machine. I own one, but it's not for mix. It's for mixing smoothies.
And I have one for my smoothies. Right. Exactly.
Magnificent for that, by the way.
Exactly. I should have had the smoothie this morning. I'm getting a little hungry now that you mention it. I mean, I'm wondering now too, I mean, how has that affected the market for pure heroin? Because I would imagine that heroin users are desperate to find something that isn't fentanyl, because despite the clear incentive for dealers to do it because it's so cheaper and easy to make, the pure stuff, it's probably becoming a bit of a rarity.
No, heroin is really fading out. It won't be around this on the streets of America in a couple of years. I don't believe. I suspect that will happen. I was in a homeless encampment the other day in Nashville, and I was speaking with a guy who was a longtime heroin user, and he said this guy dropped by the camp like a week before, he told me, and with black tar heroin, real just straight up black tar heroin, and nobody would buy it. He says, and he said it wasn't going to do me any good because I'm addicted to fentanyl. People now are using fentanyl, and they may have not known initially what they were using, but now they're addicted to it. And like any opioid, it takes your tolerance up to a certain level, and you have to have that every day. Well, heroin is much weaker. As potent as heroin is, and it can be, it's much weaker than fentanyl. So there's no way that fentanyl is going to get rid or keep the dope sickness, the withdrawals and all at bay. And so people now, like this fella, need fentanyl, and it's that is the case. I'm finding that all over the country now. Really, people have switched. People at first were leery of fentanyl, and now a lot of people still are leery. Of course, it's a dangerous thing, but it's what's happened now is that people are now addicted to it, and once you're addicted to it, you got to buy it every day. That's one of the reasons why dealers on the street would mix fentanyl, because it's, again, the supply is so plentiful, it's like salt, would mix it into cocaine, because you boost your cocaine a little bit, and after a while, that person who's buying your cocaine, thinking it's just straight cocaine, once it has fentanyl in it, now becomes a fentanyl addict, and that addict has to buy from you every single day, whereas cocaine you might buy every week, every few days. That turns an occasional customer into a regular, very serious intent customer. And that's what you're finding on the streets of America today. The people are using levels of fentanyl that would have killed them 2 or 3 years ago, but their tolerance is much, much higher. And that's why heroin is almost worthless on the street in America today.
But like, maybe I don't have the literacy, but cocaine alerts, it's a stimulant, right? And fentanyl is a depressant.
It's a depressant.
Why would, and then we can also then turn to meth after this question, but I don't understand why a cocaine user would, or they would immediately notice, right? If there's,
I think a lot of them don't understand what's going on, and it doesn't take you long to all of a sudden need that stuff. And so a couple of purchases, and you're pretty much right there. You are now a fentanyl a user, and then there's this slippery slope that you begin to slide down into, and pretty soon the cocaine isn't even the issue anymore. But dealers on the street have definitely found this to be the case. I would say this is the main reason now we're seeing rising deaths over the last 4 or 5 years, say, in the African American community due to opioids. When I was writing Dreamland, it was clear to me that the opioid epidemic was really just dramatically a white problem. I saw virtually no Black people involved in it. But now what you're seeing is African Americans whose drug of choice in the drug using community is cocaine. They are using it and they're getting addicted to fentanyl, or what's actually happening is a lot of them just simply, they have, of course, no tolerance for this stuff. And so they very quickly die. So you're seeing this real increase in African-American opioid overdose deaths. But really, when you dig down deep into the numbers, just talking with coroners in Cleveland and Akron, this is where you first saw this phenomenon taking place. It's very clear that the people who are using it think they're using cocaine. That's what killed, for example, Michael K. Williams, a great actor who was in The Wire not long ago. He I'm sure thought he was using cocaine. He was, but there was in the cocaine there was some fentanyl, and that's what I think killed him. So this is all part of the new normal, given the fact that we have synthetic drugs coming out of Mexico in the quantities that are just staggering.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, once rich Wall Street types see fentanyl in their cocaine, which is, widely recreationally used, that might change the game a little bit.
No, I think synthetic drugs have spelled the end to the concept of recreational drug use. That was a concept that is kind of old. It grew up in a time when the drugs were far more scarce, far more expensive, and far weaker, far more forgiving overall in general, you might say, than they are now. The truth is now there's no way of knowing, unless you buy a pill from a pharmacy and that pill comes in a bottle that you get from that pharmacy, there's almost no way of knowing that what you're going to using, even if you get it from a very trusted friend, that what you're using, it won't have fentanyl in it. It's all one big, game of Russian roulette now on the streets. Hence the enormous numbers of overdose deaths that we've been seeing over this year and last year.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me where you go, okay, well, if there's a way to decriminalize something like cocaine, maybe that allows for less of that, but we're dealing with such a scary wild west with the synthetics that, I would not want to decriminalize those right now. Possession, yes, but those are...
Well, the problem is, if nobody lasts on the street. There's no such thing as a long-term fentanyl user, and fentanyl is now in everything. And so there's this mix now that's really rare. It's never happened really in the widespread nature of it, where you're finding fentanyl and stimulants together, cocaine, methamphetamine, et cetera. So the truth is, anybody who has fentanyl is at risk of dying. Leaving people on the street, first of all, selling fentanyl is akin, in my opinion, I think the evidence is pretty clear on this, to firing a gun into a crowd. You are very, very likely to kill somebody and extremely likely to cause extraordinary damage to somebody and maybe a lot of people. With just possession, though, the problem is that if you're using that, you are going to die. That it's a death sentence. It's not like you have any reprieve, you know what I mean? And so I believe now this whole episode has really called into question the idea of whether it's a good idea to decriminalize these drugs. That's what we had. We had an experiment in drug decriminalization. That was what COVID was. It was unplanned. Nobody intended it, but essentially what it was saying, the jails were kicking people loose. Cops weren't arresting people for the kinds of, possession type stuff or even larger, like possession of stolen property or these kinds of things, because they didn't want people in the jail passing the coronavirus. So what that meant is, one of the effects of that is, I think, the overdose death numbers that we've seen. It's just this is a new world. People need to understand that old ideas don't apply anymore. Recreational drug use is one of them. I think decriminalizing fentanyl or meth, rather what we need to do is we need to use arresting powers to get people off the street, not to get them into prison, but to begin their treatment. And this is, I think more and more jurisdictions are understanding that you leave people on the street, they're gonna be dead. That's not like a debatable point anymore.
Well, there are trial programs in, say, something like Portugal that, doesn't involve a criminalization element for possession. You can, there's a reallocation of funds for treatment, which I feel might be something closer to what you're advocating.
Yeah, I think all of that is worth trying, but the problem is this. It's an important point to understand that these drugs do not lend themselves to treatment. You will not get people on the street. Extraordinarily difficult it's proving to be to get people who were on the street under the governing power of these very potent drugs to just opt into treatment without being pushed.
Yeah, no.
You need some push, you need some leverage over these drugs. I was just speaking with a doctor in Texas, a psychiatrist at an ER, and she was saying that very thing. All these folks, you might get them into treatment for a couple of days, but they are so prone to just bolting and leaving against medical advice, against staff advice, kind of thing. And and once they're out on the street, again, this is a deadly thing. This is not the drugs of, say, even crack of the 1980s, which was awful, but you didn't die, And then, of course, methamphetamine, which is kind of a deranging thing now, absolutely people get out of their minds, and therefore also very difficult to get into treatment, because in order to have really successful treatment, you have to be able to have that human connection. And when you're paranoid and schizophrenic and the hallucinations and all this stuff, it just is very difficult to develop that rapport with a person in that condition.
Well, let's talk about meth then, because that was another, big focus of your book. And I feel like most of the stories about meth that I heard were in 2005. And I think that, and then of course Breaking Bad brought that onto the scene nationally. But and it also was maybe kind of something that set the stage for the opioid epidemic, because it was hitting white communities pretty hard, which caused different kinds of media attention, as opposed to the crack cocaine epidemic. But what's different about meth this time around? Well,
meth this time around is made with a different way. It's no longer the chemical I referred to earlier, ephedrine, which is a decongestant you find in Sudafed pills and all the rest. That's a very easy thing to turn into methamphetamine, and the Mexican traffickers had industrialized that and made a lot of it. They never were really able to cover much. They covered a lot of the West, never got east of the Mississippi River, and then all of that changed. And this ephedrine meth was like a party drug. It was all euphoric, big in the gay community, big in really. You want to be around people, a sociable kind of drug. It was not good for you. You decayed over periods of time, and you remember those mugshot posters of people over 6 or 7 years. You'd see them transformed. But that's kind of what it was. This new stuff is very, very different. The effects of it are very, very different. Let's put it that way. This began in 2008, really 2009. The Mexican government outlawed ephedrine. Mexican traffickers switched to a new way of making, a more messy way, one that involves lots of different industrial, legal, toxic chemicals. And the precursor in that way of making it is known as P2P. So phenyl 2-propanone. You can make the benefit to traffickers of this method. There's only one of them, and that's very important. And that is that with P2P, you can make P2P many, many different ways with all kinds of different chemical, hacks kind of. And so if you can find those chemicals, and they're widely available, they're used in all kinds of industries, you can make this stuff forever. And that's exactly what's happening. So you saw the march of this stuff really begin in 2009, but in 2010, 11, but then really as the supplies really exploded, 2013, 14, it was really all over the West, all over certainly the West Coast. By 2016, 17, it was in the Midwest. And by 2019, it was up into New England, which never had any meth at all. And that remarkable thing, as I said, the coverage has been just dramatic all over the country. And at the same time, this is a stunning fact that even as they covered the entire country, the price of that product dropped by 80%. So they're covering it and the price dropped. But this meth has another part to the story that I only learned later as I was about to close to finishing The Least of Us. And that is that it brings with it, it's accompanied by very severe symptoms of schizophrenia, paranoia, severe paranoia, florid hallucinations of all kinds, and delusions. And very quickly, of course, people are incapable of being around others. If ephedrine meth was a social drug, this one is more like an enclosing drug. You kind of enclose into your own mind, which is all of a sudden developing all these bizarre ideas about what's around you. Very quickly, you fall into homelessness. You can't really stay in a homeless shelter because the shelters are terrifying because everyone's scaring the hell out of you. You're paranoid about everybody. And so this has also led to the street homelessness. The tents, I believe, are closely connected to this kind of methamphetamine. The tents are perfect lodging for someone who views the world as just constantly full of threats and scary monsters. So if you're all alone in your tent, you can be alone and kind of away from this scary world that meth has created in your mind. So as this has marched across the country, you see tent encampments, homelessness, and mental illness rising along with that in areas also that never had homelessness before, rural areas with no problems of affordable housing. There's the Rust Belt towns and that kind of thing. And so this is part of what's going on in America today, due largely, I would say, due intensely to this massive quantity of this one synthetic drug that's able to be produced down in Mexico now.
So that's really the parallel here with fentanyl here, is that like the I don't want to say the democratization of the production, but the democratization of the production also has lended to cheaper but more extreme production standards that have created drugs that are,
absolutely. I would say that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's what's happened. It's you've got all kinds. We think of what the groups down in Mexico as cartels. They're not cartels. Economists will tell you a cartel is something that is a group that forms to constrict production to force price up. The opposite is happening here. It's a total glut economy, and that is because they're really not cartels, except for in some ways. That kind of when it comes to defense and violence, that maybe there's some kind of unity, but really on the ground, when it comes to production, anybody can make this stuff, so long as you kind of pay a little tribute to the people who are kind of the more serious actors in your region, that kind of thing. No, this is a lot, many people. Now, a lot of people who have come from the marijuana world, where now we're legalizing marijuana, so they can't make the revenue that they're used to making with marijuana. And so meth has kind of emerged as a substitute for that. So a lot of people move into that. But then a lot of people, the methods are very easy and very well known down in some of these regions. Again, the chemicals coming into Mexico are just scandalous. They're just stunning. And so more and more people are making it, and hence the price has dropped. This is not like the economist version of what a cartel is, and the glut of these two drugs is kind of proof of that.
Well, Sam Quinones, his book is called The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. You spoke to so many people in this book. I'd encourage everybody to read it. Thank you so much for your time, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Emma. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yes, of course. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, come back, wrap up the first hour of The Majority Report. We are back. We are back. We had somebody write in, KY Nick, as a former heroin addict from Cincinnati, when I was using in 2014, you could drive to gas stations in the city and get free, quote, tester bags from dealers. Supply is definitely not an issue anymore. Yeah, that's nuts. All right, let's touch a little bit on what happened yesterday with Paul Gosar. So, for people who aren't aware, Representative Paul Gosar, who now has at least 2 siblings of, I think he has 2 others who may not be speaking publicly about him, but 2's enough. 2's enough. They are calling him a maniac, unstable, a variety of different things that should probably set off alarm bells for people. But he is still in the House of Representatives, although yesterday he was formally censured, mostly along party lines. There were 2 Republicans that joined to censure him, I should say, on the video that he tweeted out, which was an Attack on Titan parody of him looking like he was killing AOC and assaulting Joe Biden. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke on the House floor during the censure vote, and she spoke about the nihilism of the Republican Party in a way that I haven't heard a representative speak about these themes really ever. And I think she encapsulated a lot of the psychology and the philosophy of how Republicans operate right now.
Not just the Republican, but I have seen other members of this party advance the argument, including Representative Gosar himself, the illusion that this was just a joke. That what we say and what we do does not matter so long as we claim a lack of meaning. Now, this nihilism runs deep, and it conveys and betrays a certain contempt for the meaning and importance of our work here. That what we do, so long as we claim that it is a joke, doesn't matter. That what we say here doesn't matter. That our actions every day as elected leaders in the United States of America doesn't matter. That this chamber and what happens in it doesn't matter. And I am here to rise to say that it does. Our work here matters. Our example matters. There is meaning in our service. And as leaders in this country, when we incite violence with depictions against our colleagues, that trickles down into violence in this country. And that is where we must draw the line, independent of party, identity, or belief. It is about a core recognition of human dignity and value and worth. So when we talk about, as mentioned in the resolution, that these depictions are part of a larger trend of misogyny and racial misogyny, racist misogyny, this has results in dampening the participation.
Yeah, I mean, there is meaning in governance. The Republican Party is the anti-government party, and they've made that clear for history. Small government's one version of it, but then it's just they're against doing anything for people. It's indicative in their actions. They serve as stewards for the financial industry, for capitalists. They view their function as dismantling government, and so it should not be a surprise to anybody that they view their role within government with like a joker-fied nihilism. And so she points all of that out there. She focused on their words and their actions and things like, tweeting out a violent video depicting the assault and killing of government officials of opposing parties. But the quote that stuck out to me, and there were two, when she said, "There is meaning in our service," because there should be. But because of the way that we've structured our, say, campaign finance system, for example, it incentivizes one side of the political spectrum in the Republicans to see their service as destroying the limiting powers of a government on the very capitalists that fund them. And so this is an entire troll job. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the #1 grassroots fundraiser in the Republican Party, and that's her value to them. And she has no committee assignments. She's unable to do anything except maybe a speech or two or a media appearance. But that's sufficient. That's sufficient for her constituents and for the people that support her, because they do not want her there to govern. They do not want dignity in service. The Republicans are defined by their dismantling of government. And so, you know, for a lot of the people that support them, the trolling is enough because they find some visceral release in that, and the fact that they're using that to obscure what they're actually doing and helping the richest of us all, that's fine, because, you know, the base got their emotional release. But this is just like how this has always been the Republican Party. It's just now it's more naked, and they're able to kind of artistically express it via social media, I guess, and accelerate it.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's fully detached from policy. The thing I feel for Gosar, because a lot of these people, they basically run daycares for sort of rancid little Nazis. That's what their staff is, like Matt Gaetz and all those. And this goes for also Tucker Carlson. And it's more fun to talk about this. This is why Laura Ingraham did the whole joke thing with the You. I was watching You. What show were you watching? Because like this sort of like you say, like trolling BS is really all that the content they need, because they're just filling a hole. I mean, and it's not just the like service should have meaning, right? Joe Manchin is right now thinking of some complete bullshit to tell America so that he doesn't have to include a family leave, right? Like, so like we're at a situation now where meaning has been ripped from democracy, and it's an aspiration that that has meaning, but it's going to take a lot of effort to make it meaningful again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, folks, we are going to head into the fun half. I'm seeing some of the comments criticizing some of the solutions advocated by Sam there, our author here. I understand that. Again, like, you know,
we'll get into some of that.
We can get into some of that in the fun half. Brandon, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. And yourself?
I'm doing all right. What's happening over on the discourse?
Well, we have a new episode out for patrons over on the Patreon entitled Secret President Mitt Romney, where my, I want to say lovely co-host extols his newest conspiracy theory that Mitt Romney has secretly been president since 2008. I'm sorry, 2012.
That's beautiful. I would love to hear more about that. Matt, Left Reckoning was last night, was it not?
Yeah, we had a full show last night. First, William Shockey of Africa as a Country to talk about the effect of Frederick Willem de Klerk and how he should not be credited with ending apartheid like the New York Times did for him. We also talked to Jacob from the Valley Labor Reporters about the stuff going on with Warrior Met and their attack on free speech there, and how BlackRock and the other major multinational corporations that are putting the money behind it why it's kind of scary that they don't seem to be acting like they're losing like maybe close to $400 million on the slow production, and what it means for, like, when giant investors can come in and just float strike busting. It's a pretty scary situation. And in the post game, we talked about the little bit of good news in the success with John Deere. And we also talked about the Ben Shapiro, Stephen Jay Gould, IQ stuff. So patreon.com/Left4Reckoning. Go check out that show, folks.
Oh, you covered the gambit. Binder, hello.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
Doing well. What's happening over on Doomed?
Well, over on Doomed, this past Tuesday, which is now uploaded, the main segment is now uploaded to my YouTube channel, but youtube.com/MattBinder. But I went live on Tuesday on Twitch, twitch.tv/MattBinder. And I broke down that Jimmy Dore segment on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and how apparently the mainstream media completely failed everyone because Jimmy Dore didn't pay much attention to the case, and he had originally thought that the people Kyle Rittenhouse shot were black. And that's apparently mainstream media's fault, that he didn't, click a link and look at the pictures of the people that were...
Glenn saying too?
I thought these guys were black.
Yeah, that's what all these guys are saying, because none of them paid attention to this case. None of them cared enough to pay attention. So they think that because they didn't do the work of clicking a link, mainstream media failed them.
Well, all that they're interested in is branding themselves as opposed to mainstream media anyway, to be completely honest.
Or no, it's all about like how the liberal media just wants you to think that
thought police.
Thought police, like, of course, these guys weren't even black. Like, they want to tell you he's a racist. He didn't even kill black people.
Right. Which of course is the necessary part of him going down to a Black Lives Matter rally, protest, whatever you want to call it, with a rifle in order to protect property. That's, that has nothing to do with the race of those people. Even though there's a video of him that the judge wouldn't allow to be shown at the trial, but there's a video of him from earlier, not that day, but days before. Where he posted a video where he saw like someone shoplifting from a store who was black, and he said how much he wished he could shoot someone like that.
That's just patriotism right there. I don't know.
I was actually thinking about something similar, not the Jimmy Dore thing, but like we do have a problem, I think, with people in not the media broadly speaking, but the way we characterize white supremacist violence or violence in the name of like white supremacy or whatever nebulous concept that it's being branded as today, as being something that is uniquely targeted towards the black community in such a way that's going to become caught in there. And so like even if you thought that the like victims were inherently black because that's the mindset you were in, that really says, I think, more about the way in which we're kept from the reality that white supremacist violence is oftentimes the underlying, along with misogynist violence, the underlying ideology of the mass shooters that we see who kill people indiscriminately in this country.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely.
But that's kind of I think is kept from us for reasons that is unrelated to whatever they were talking about, because it's like, well, yeah, if people knew that about white supremacy, they might feel a little bit less like it's a problem for other people and more like it's just generally a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So in that segment, Jimmy Dore had on as his guest to walk him through everything, because again, Jimmy's doesn't know the subject very well. Matt or Aflia, whatever, I forget, the guy who got fired from the Bernie campaign, literally like the day he was hired, because he created some video in his past that came out that did not, not a good look.
Weird hiring choices by the Bernie campaign in 2020. Just
right. So he was in that segment. Right. Yeah. But he was in that segment, and he's reached out to me now, and it looks like we are going to have a discussion about the case. That is not tonight, though. That's in the coming days. Tonight, though, Natalie Shore will be joining me at youtube.com/MattBinder and on twitch.tv/MattBinder to discuss the very real Havana syndrome, which by very real, we mean probably not very real at all.
Yeah, she's been doing some great writing on that. I'm excited for that episode. Okay.
I mean, honestly, I thought Havana syndrome was when you get that song in your head and you can't not automatically go ooh na na when you hear the word Havana. That's Havana syndrome to me.
You got it stuck in my head. So thank you for infecting me with your Havana syndrome.
I thought you meant the song like Copacabana.
That's it. No.
I meant that song.
I'm talking that song. Yeah. Is it Camille Cabello or whatever her name is? That who it is?
Yes. But the Barry Manilow Copacabana one might even be more earwormy, so I'll decide which one's going to torture me for the next 24 hours after our break. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. Again, we're going to be taking your calls today, 646-257-3920. Let's read some IMs right now. H-Dub says, this guy sounds like he wrote Reefer Madness. This is fear-mongering. I don't think it's fear-mongering about fentanyl and meth. The solution about, getting people off the streets and incarceration, I don't know if I agree, but he's also, if you read the book, he comes from a much more reporter-esque background where he's been to all these houseless encampments and stuff. And so I think take the reporting for what you will, and maybe not,
the diagnosis.
The diagnosis. The prognosis.
I don't know
right.
which one it would be.
Who cares? And people know what you're saying. Stinky says, LOL at the Knicks. Sorry, Emma. Yeah, it's like, I don't understand why they can't beat the Magic. Yeah, maybe.
Timberwolves beat the Bulls, baby.
Yes, I saw that. Gay Boner. Fun fact, Baker Mayfield is vaccinated. Emma's two favorite QBs, Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson, are not. Why does Emma hate science? Good point. They are my two favorites.
That's a great point.
It is a great point. Hassan Pecker. Gosar should have lost all committee assignments for cause of textbook sporadic terrorism.
Stochastic, I think.
Stochastic?
Is that the word they use?
Oh, yes. Did I say sporadic?
Sporadic, yeah. But yeah, I think stochastic terrorism, meaning like you dial up the pressure and like, so think of the way I heard somebody describe this was like, think of boiling water and how the more you turn up the pressure, the more boil will splash against the top of the lid or whatever. Stochastic terrorism is like dialing up that pressure so more of the stuff splashes out.
Okay, there you go. Nisi, Eastern Iowa. Nick in Eastern Iowa. Sorry, it's Nick without a K. Love to hear your thoughts on Crypto.com replacing Staples as the sponsor of the Lakers, Clippers, Kings Arena. $700 million over 20 years. Yeah, it's going to be it's not even Crypto Center. It's going to be Crypto.com Center. I joked on Twitter that they wanted to call it Pyramid Scheme Center, but it was a little it was a little on the nose.
Well, of course, it's Crypto.com Center, Arena, or whatever it is, because that wouldn't be the brand name then. You can't just, these guys are paying lots of money to make sure everyone knows to go to Crypto.com. If it was just crypto, someone might Google what crypto is and go to one of the other many exchanges, and then what would be the point of them paying for all this?
Yeah,
I think it will be great once the NFTs become so popular that they start being used as like the mascots of basketball teams. Like you have like the Lakers replaced by the Lazy Lions and stuff like that. You know, like then finally we'll enter the digital age.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd say. Spike Friedman on Twitter had a statement. Phil Anschutz, a massive donor to anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion causes, just pocketed a cool $700 million for slapping a crypto ad on a 20-year-old building in downtown LA that was built on formerly public land and financed as part of a community redevelopment loan. And before it was even that public land, it was a barrio in LA that was took over through public domain. So like I think that story of development and gentrification, and ultimately that's privatized for capitalists, is probably a bigger story than the crypto angle, which I of course have plenty of smoke for. I think crypto's a dumb fad that might last as long as Staples. I'm not sure. Right, like we need to move on from Staples, I guess, because people don't go to Staples, buy Staples anymore.
Right.
But yeah, Crypto.com is. It's funny that like Reason with Nick Gillespie had a piece about how the elites just want to bash crypto, and it's like, really, Matt Damon doing an ad and it being the where the Lakers play and the elites are against crypto. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like I had someone reach out to me, like a good friend who's on the left, who says, one of my friends wants to know why you're so anti-crypto. And I mean, there's a lot of people who are like left-leaning who I think are duped by this, but guys, it's a multi-level marketing scheme. The people who already have the crypto that's gonna make them rich, they're the ones who are advertising for you to buy it, so the value of their crypto goes up.
Yeah, they call it the network effect. Isn't like more losers to sell to.
This isn't to say that people can't make money off of crypto, but
you can absolutely,
you
like
can.
by speculation.
Yes,
but
okay.
It's not good for society.
It's not, but in mass, most of the people that buy crypto are gonna lose out, and they're gonna lose money.
Right, absolutely.
I'm the bag on this stuff. Anybody kept holding a Bitcoin that they can't give for dollars, or an NFT they can't get for dollars, or whatever they can't get for dollars, is going to be toast.
Right. I mean, I got crypto people up in my mentions on Twitter today because I have upset them because a New York Times reporter mentioned how we haven't even really started to get our minds around the amount of wealth crypto has created. And this guy's usually pretty good, Kevin Roos. So this is just a bad moment for him. But I pointed out that crypto has not created any wealth. There is no product or service, no revenue being generated. The winners' money is coming directly from the pockets of the losers. And that's what it is. That is 100% what this is. Where is this money coming from crypto? It's coming from people who are buying in order to make money. That is the point. Well, in order to make money, other people who also bought in have to lose money. They sell at a loss because they need money at that moment. You know, a lot of people who put money into this, they don't necessarily have the money to sit around 5-10 years to watch it flourish. You know, if they got in early, you know, a lot of those early Bitcoiners actually don't even have anything because they got scammed out of it early on. Look up Mt. Gox and how this legit or this formerly or this exchange that posed as legit ended up scamming everyone who put their money into it. I mean, and by the way, there's about to be a huge Bitcoin sell-off because the settlement, all the lawsuits that went on because of Mt. Gox are finally going to come through, and everyone who lost money in Mt. Gox is going to get a small portion of the leftover Bitcoin holdings they had. And you can guarantee when those people who've had this terrible experience with cryptocurrency receive those Bitcoin, they're going to immediately sell off in order to make back at least a little bit of whatever they lost all those many years ago.
We have some breaking news. I just wanted to make sure that we updated the story that we did earlier today in this program. The Oklahoma governor has commuted the death sentence of Julius Jones, who was convicted of killing a businessman in 1999. So he's still life in prison for now, but that is huge news. Huge news.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Wow. Wow. You want to take a call, Bender?
Sure, let's do it. Going to the phones. Let's take 774. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Connor from Worcester.
Hey, Connor from Worcester. How you doing? What would you like to talk about?
Pretty good.
Did you like my Sam Quinones impression,
dead?
by the way, of the Worcester? I tried really hard.
Not as good as Sam's.
Of course not. What would you like to talk about?
So do you guys think the Queen is dead or what?
Oh, what was that? What was that
Yes,
tweet that was
yes,
going around?
yes. Wait, hold on one
Next time we
second.
see her, she'll be in a different form or something like that. What was that tweet?
No, it was her reign
Yeah,
has
she's going
entered
into a
different phase.
metamorphosis.
I want to say that not only, caller, do I believe Connor from Worcester, only do I believe the Queen is dead, I believe she's been dead since October. I believe she's been dead since October. And it's funny that you mentioned this because I've been on this train since October, and we have some late adopters who are now just realizing she's dead. And I want to be clear that I was one of the early rallying cries for she's been dead since October. And given the, I hate to say the problems caused by Brexit and, the petrol shortage and all other things going on in the UK, they cannot afford to announce a very costly, very, very costly, coronation and funeral, wasting a lot of gas on that parade. And also no one wants William to be, I'm sorry, God, I get them confused all the time. No one wants Charles to be king. It's a whole mess.
Are you trying to get us flagged for?
Well, I found that tweet, and if what you said was true, Brandon, where it was her reign has entered a new phase, that would sound a lot less ominous. But it's actually Queen has entered a new phase, and we may not see her until February.
Oh my God!
She's transcended. She's a pure energy being now.
It does sound like she's transforming into something else.
She's like the alien, the bean floating in space at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, I just were going to say life force.
What was the face from Doctor Who? Just the face. The woman who lived for hundreds of thousands of years or something. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Not Doctor Who.
That's the first episode of the remake that premiered when the 2000s were Billy Piper. I don't know who that face is, but yeah, that's about right.
Lady Cassandra, I think her name was. I'm looking it up.
No, but I think that I'm actually very familiar with the timeline of this. There has not been proof of life for the Queen since October. And that was because they couldn't have a dead Queen announcement before Halloween because, all the people who don't like her would have had dead Queen costumes. And then, you have Guy Fawkes Day right after that. And it's just effigy burning season was in full effect. Now we're, in the middle of Thanksgiving, they aren't, but now we're in that sort of weird period between Guy Fawkes Day and Christmas. UK, I don't know. They're going to try to deep fake her Christmas speech as well.
Oh, well, I mean,
I don't know if this is true too.
Go ahead.
I saw that somebody was writing that if the queen dies, they like shut down every business in the country for 3 days or something like that. I don't know how true that is, but some people were saying, they're trying not to announce it to halt this like economic disaster that would follow it.
Everything that I know about the UK comes from reality television shows and questionable biopics about Diana. So I would 100% believe that.
So Sky News has this article yesterday. Queen's seen in first official engagement since missing Remembrance Service Sunday. The Monarch 95 held a face-to-face audience with General Sir Nick Carter, the Chief of the Defense Staff. The first public engagement. So if you were going to stage something, you would want the Chief of the Defense Staff, of course.
Won't the real tell be? Isn't like a big deal over there? The Queen's Christmas speech. So if she doesn't do that, isn't that going to be the tell right there, that she broke hundreds of years of tradition and didn't do the televised speech?
That's one of the reasons why they have to pretend she's
They're going to do like a Kevin
Christmas.
Spacey speech.
I'm also picturing like a puppeted version of her, like she's sitting on someone's lap, just like, "Well, Merry Christmas!" Like obviously it's not her. Like I don't know.
It's gonna be clearly like the CGI like that you can do with like Christmas cards, where it makes it look like you're singing "Merry Christmas" or something.
The whole situation is
jabbers, that jib jab.
Jib jab version of the Queen.
The whole situation is very bizarre.
Like when they CGI'd Olivia Soprano.
I just want to be clear. All those right wingers and their green screen Joe Biden theories, they're completely crazy. The Queen theories, 100% legit.
See, that's the thing though, because this is very reminiscent of like when Joe Biden disappeared.
Go, but we'll keep talking about this.
All right, take it easy.
Later.
Allegedly.
Right.
Go on.
In the YouTube chat, I was just reminded about that character from Doctor Who. Her line was, she constantly yelled at her assistant to moisturize me, because she was just a face and she needed constant skin moisturizer.
I think you've cracked this wide open, Matt.
That's the Queen right there.
This is the missing piece that I've been looking for since October.
Explains actually the entirety of the British Empire.
Stellar Vision writes in, "The Queen isn't dead. She's lycanthrope." I don't even know what that means.
Werewolf.
Explains her long life and why we will never see her on the full moon. Got it.
No. This is the classic Lich territory. They're putting her soul into a phylactery.
Wait, do werewolves? Is it werewolf lore that they have long lives? I thought that was vampires.
If you're driving like werewolf lore from the Underworld movie series, it is. But not
I don't know.
Movie.
Yeah, werewolf lore to me is always werewolves are the natural lifespan of a regular person. They can just turn into a wolf.
It's actually worse.
Very large wolf.
It's the natural lifespan of a wolf. So you actually lose
10 years.
You lose a bunch of years when you become a werewolf.
Damn, the benefits of being a werewolf aren't really that high. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think it depends on like your werewolf lore. I think sometimes it looks really uncomfortable, and then sometimes you're just like a little hairy, and they're good at basketball. So it depends.
Yeah, right. Obviously. Chris Burdick, if they just called it Crypto Center without the .com, cryptozoologists might flock to the arena looking for Bigfoot and the Chupacabra. Nug Wrangler, I wonder if crypto would have ever caught on without the wealth inequality in this country, letting wealthy people dump money into some fantasy coin.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd probably be significantly less valued if like escaping divorce accounting wasn't a thing.
And of course, that's why you're seeing this massive amount of venture capital and other wealthy people's money go into this, because they see the grift. They know, they see exactly where this money's coming from and why these people are buying into it. Like I saw someone, all right, this is another person I got into it with today. They tweeted, this is a crypto person, venture capitalists accidentally getting into socialism under the guise of Web3. Love to see it. Web3 is the whole movement to crypto, NFTs, everything's on the blockchain. And so I replied, venture capitalists are getting richer by duping you into thinking your crypto and NFTs equal participating in socialism. Yep. They're not the ones being fooled. They're the ones fooling you. They're the ones with all the money to make. You think they would just throw it in the air if they didn't know exactly what they were doing with their tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars? They know the grift. They're taking advantage of you.
Yeah, I mean, there was a story a few days ago about who was giving $180,000 to Kristen Cinema, and it was crypto people led by a fundraiser in Menlo Park.
Yeah.
By Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, a giant venture capital, like one of the
because crypto regulation was considered provision in Build Back Better.
Exactly, and that's what Cinema's attention for Build Back Better was on crypto. And by the way, Andreessen Horowitz, among other investments they've made, including like Facebook and that sort of stuff, a Substack. But yeah, like this is who is promoting Mark Andreessen, the guy who was defending colonialism of India. Like that's the guy who wants to do socialism through crypto, and that's why he had a fundraiser for Kristen Cinema in Menlo Park. I mean, give me a fucking break.
I got blocked. I got blocked by one of his VC partners, Chris Dixon. Guy is also pushing crypto, the whole Web3 thing, huge. And I pointed out that the language he's using, it sounds exactly like the language that's used by QAnon believers and anti-vaxxers. And he blocked me. But of course,
these guys are frauds. Venture capitalists are complete charlatans that make money basically off of the fees that they get from investors. And like. Yeah, it is ridiculous that they get such a hand in shaping future technology in this country, because all they're looking for is a place to move all the money that they made by striking it lucky, by getting in on a couple investments now. And now they just want those investments to live tax-free and movable away from any sort of people who wanted to control it. And let me say this about like surveillance. So you're pro-surveillance? I am pro-surveillance of money. Surveil the shit out of people with money and the way that they're spending that money. I'm good with that.
Right. It's interesting that this Web3 thing is being pushed so hard, because if you even look at it, like obviously it's what they view as what comes after Web 2, which is the social web. Like at least like obviously these guys all wanted to get rich and make money off of like the social web, which is like social media websites, and that's why they put their money into it. But behind that, there was like a greater good that we could take from it, which was that we are being like the whether you think social media is a net positive or net negative, that aside, the idea that we are connected via these platforms and can communicate with people that otherwise we might not have been able to communicate with otherwise. Like there is a greater idea, no matter how they've perverted it and made their money off of it. There is a legit, a greater idea behind it. Web3 is simply monetize everything, ownership over everything. Everything's commodified, mask completely off. We want to make money off of everything you do online. And that is what Web3 is pushing. And like, if that's what you view as the future of the internet, then if you think the internet's like a dark place right now, like shit's going to get a lot worse.
Pensatucky Mike says, Thursdays are becoming my favorite episodes of the week. The Thursday Fun Half Crew has really found some amazing chemistry, love, and solidarity from Central PA. Very nice. I'm going to read one more and then let's get into some clips. I think... Aaron is not cool says there were a couple of cocaine ODs over the summer in NYC due to fentanyl, and it freaked everyone out, even non-drug users like me. Yeah, I've heard of. I thought that might have been scaremongering, but maybe that's.
I think it remains to be seen. I think it's worth monitoring as scaremongering.
If you're gonna use coke or ketamine or something recreationally, get strips. Yeah. Lost a good friend when he smoked weed mixed with fentanyl. It's a bad problem up here in North Dakota. R.I.P. Connor. He would have been 24 last week, says North Dakota Llama.
Jesus.
I'm so sorry to hear that. All right, let's do some clips here. Maybe we'll begin with Matt Walsh, because Matt Walsh is obsessed with the concept of pedophilia. Often conservatives are in general. To me, it feels a little bit like projecting, but of course, a lot of that has to do with their desire to appeal to the QAnon types, and they have this like existential dread about women being outside of the home and not being able to monitor the kids at all times. And of course, then they're going to be attacked. He wanted to wade into the Big Bird conversation here. Here he is calling Big Bird a child molester. So there's that.
All right, so today we cancel Sesame Street. We could have canceled Sesame Street a week ago when Big Bird tweeted. Big Bird has a Twitter account now, but he tweeted that he'd just gotten the vaccine despite having natural.
pause it just for a sec? Just right off the get. You could keep it up. I'm only going to say it really quickly, but I thought they were anti-cancel culture.
Yeah, they're saving Dr. Seuss, and now they're canceling Sesame Street.
Right, I know, it's odd.
Which children's culture that I can trust anymore.
Exactly.
It's just weird. They still talk about Big Bird like they think he's just a big bird, like that can literally talk. Like,
well, I
why
mean,
wouldn't Big Bird have a Twitter account? Like, he's not like a literal giant bird.
It becomes apparent that maybe, yeah, Matt Walsh is still committed to Big Bird being a real thing throughout this segment.
All right, so today we cancel Sesame Street. We could have canceled Sesame Street a week ago when Big Bird tweeted. Big Bird has a Twitter account now, by the way. He tweeted that he'd just gotten the vaccine despite having natural immunity from respiratory viruses due to the fact that puppets don't have respiratory systems. But I suppose if we're giving the vaccine to kids who are almost completely immune to severe COVID illness, then we might as well give it to fictional birds also. To make matters creepier, Big Bird then appeared on a CNN town hall to further push pharmaceuticals onto kids. Big Bird seems to have really settled into his new role as drug dealer. Here's what that looked like.
You know, my granny bird says that since I'm 6 years old, I can get the vaccine.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Big Bird.
But, well, I have a lot of questions. Like, what is a vaccine? And does it have to be a shot? And will I still need to wear my mask?
Those are such great questions, Big Bird, and it turns out lots of kids and families have questions too.
So, over the next half hour, we're going to be answering your questions, talking with experts and giving you the information you need about vaccinations for kids.
You know what? Elmo better go change. See you later.
Oh, come on! It's time for the town hall! Yay!
Okay, this raises a number of questions. Questions like, what the hell happened to Big Bird's voice? Why does he sound like a child molester now? He sounds distinctly creepy all of a sudden. And also, what kind of 6-year-old is watching a CNN special about vaccinations in the first place? Who is this? Who is the audience for this?
You, apparently. You're apparently the audience for this.
Yeah, why would a children's show want to naturalize the idea of vaccines? Like what kind of crazy?
I just think Big Bird should be coming out in favor of the freedom of discourse and also, you know, anti-critical race theory, because that would make it a lot more sense for like what is clearly a children's cartoon that's promoting public health on a public broadcast system to, you know, like that finds its home on a public broadcasting channel would do.
Yeah, I mean, he says pushing pharmaceuticals onto them. I'd be curious what
Ask your doctor about ivermectin.
Yeah, right. Would he be happy if Big Bird was, oh, golly gee, hydroxychloroquine? I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like a child molester.
I'm flying over Brooklyn, and we're looking for Kyrie Irving's house, and we're going to force him to take the jab.
Well, that would be base. But I mean, I again, how do you? One, I'm fascinated by his psychology and his obsession with him being a child molester and just like completely projecting that onto the situation. And apparently Big Bird's a him. I didn't know. He keeps anthropomorphizing Big Bird and he calls him a puppet, but then also talks about his Twitter account and ascribes a gender to Big Bird, which I wasn't aware of. But he's also a drug dealer. Again, if Big Bird, I can't believe I'm saying this, was promoting ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or whatever, you know, nonsense garbage, pharmaceuticals that right-wingers are in favor of, no, it'd just be, those are our drugs. Those are our favorite drugs, so it's fine.
Well, I gotta point this out because he said apparently Big Bird's got a Twitter account now. And listen, I know this isn't really the point, but I think it's funny. Big Bird joined Twitter before Matt Walsh did by like a year.
Oh. Damn, he's just jealous of his Big Bird's Twitter clout, right?
Right. Oh boy, yeah, that's not the point, but I thought it was funny.
I'm a 35-year-old man, and I'm gonna be devoting a segment regularly to children's culture, and I'm gonna talk about them being creepy.
But that's the thing, though. Like, the right has to equate any kind of education that falls outside of the boundaries of incredibly like strict conservative education, which is creepy in many of the ways they project onto liberals, as being pedophilic, because that's the only way they can justify like why they should be able to enforce like a strict Catholic dogma onto like schools or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Walsh is one of the least talented of the right-wing pundits, specifically coming out of the Daily Wire things. He's grasping at straws in a lot of ways. He was doing some on-the-ground, in-person work at school board meetings throughout Virginia, I believe, recently. He keeps trying to make his moments viral, but they're not necessarily hitting in the way that he wishes they were. So he's got to keep going.
He's had a history of doing this, though. Like, I think he knows that he's not talented. He does. He's not one of the conservative minds that get thrown around in that world for being very smart or intelligent or well-spoken. So he knows, I'm pretty sure he realizes where his ceiling is. So he does what he can to cause this outrage. And that basically causes that group of people who would otherwise, flock to the more talented conservative talkers to, defend Matt Walsh, because he sees that he's got the libs coming after him. And thus, they look at him as if he is of that level when he's not.
I mean, also a lot of far right people are just generally obsessed, and we're seeing this with the critical race theory thing in schools too, with what they consider to be like liberal indoctrination of like the kids. And that's why they're obsessed with college campuses. They would be obsessed with going to high school campuses and being able to give their speeches there if that wouldn't make them seem creepy. That's why they go to school board meetings instead. And so like the obvious move of a public broadcast thing, more or less puppet show to like promote what the public, the United States public health position is to them a step so far outside of what they're able to do, which is like go on these kinds of like children aimed shows and promote their like weird ideology. And even though it's something as basic as vaccination, they feel like it's part of a changing tide that they're going to be unable to deal with, which I think is, again, a weird anxiety considering conservatives of varying crossing spectrum control at basically every aspect of our government. But these little like pop culture things that they're losing ground on really bother them. Like now they have like the first Asian American puppet. They're going to be mad about that too.
Right, exactly. All right, let's do another clip. Bradley, did you get what I sent you in the chat? The QAnon shaman thing. You have it? So, the QAnon shaman, you might be aware of him, Matt. Jacob Chansley.
Right.
He's the guy that went to the Capitol shirtless. He wears the big horns on his head. He is one of the most devoted QAnon followers. He hired a bit of an eccentric lawyer who spoke to the press today, or it was yesterday. The lawyer's name is Albert Watkins, and he had something to say to Donald Trump about the trial of all of his supporters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
After spending this much time talking to Jacob Chansley and learning about him, what do you think is appropriate accountability for the former president?
What do I think about his what?
What is an appropriate accountability for former President Trump?
Well, if you're asking my opinion, my opinion is meaningless. I will say that I would probably be far more effective over a beer with former President Trump, even if he didn't have a beer, because I understand he doesn't drink beer, but I'd have a beer. And I'd tell him, you know what? You got a few fucking things to do, including clearing this fucking mess up and taking care of a lot of the jackasses that you fucked up because of January 6th. Now, in the meantime, I might talk to him about some other things that I'd agree with him on. But my opinion doesn't mean shit.
Listen, like this is the same guy who was basically calling his own client like crazy. Right.
Well, yeah. I think he might have used the R word.
Oh, yeah. Okay, even better. But I mean,
He swears like a sailor, that man.
Right. Right. I mean, that is the best play for these people, especially the QAnon people who were down there on January 6th, to be honest, because it's the most based in reality for them specifically. They are they need a lot of help. They really do. They're not the same. And, you know, I tweeted this, the QAnon shaman, the fact that he got the same sentence as 41 months for just the obstruction of like the electoral thing, as a guy who also got hit with a charge of assaulting a police officer, a former MMA fighter who was down there. I mean, it shows that just like, you know, his getup basically made him the face of this whole thing to the world. So he's going to be the one made the example of, when this is a guy, and this is not showing sympathy for him or anything. He clearly needs to face consequences, but the idea that he's the one who's going to face probably the most consequences simply because he stood out, a guy who did not have anything to do with the plotting or planning of any of this, did not brainwash anyone. He's not even an influencer in the QAnon world. He literally is just one of the many followers himself. It just shows how everyone else who was involved here, from the militia groups to the white supremacist gangs like the Proud Boys, the 3%ers, up all the way to Trump himself, are getting away with this with either very little punishment or no punishment, no consequence at all. And it just is a perfect example of how the justice system works. That even someone like the QAnon shaman, who's like obviously is someone who probably never even looked at this stuff and cared about how the criminal justice system worked, he's still gonna be the one, because he's just a nobody, facing all the blame from this.
Right. I mean, Donald Trump should be facing some consequences. That is why, you know, it's important that the congressional investigation into this continues and has teeth, right? That's why it was important that Garland enforced the congressional subpoena when it came to Steve Bannon, because those are some of the powers that be that need to face consequences. But he's absolutely right that the top of all of this is Donald Trump. That's why Trump's trying so hard to conceal his presidential records in this area when in regards to January 6th. I mean, we have words out of his own mouth in public about encouraging this kind of stuff. Imagine what we're going to see behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, just to jump in on that point too, I think that, you know, it can't be understated that that's also part of the strategy of these types of far-right demagogues like Trump, like the people who were promoting this event, who do not face any consequences, to surround themselves with this layer of the more credulous members of our society who, you know, if you're going to be incredibly generous, are being tricked by various means via, like, you know, Facebook conspiracy groups that make them feel like their alienation as a result of capital is actually the cause of some grand conspiracy, or, you know, any number of vectors that get them there that day. But, you know, we know all that stuff. And when the left tries to combat it, when, you know, various outlets are promoting the kinds of people who like traffic in these circles and promote these ideas, you know, we're taught that it's like canceling them to warn people that like who they're going to, you know, who they're running around with, the Richard Spencers of the world, like the far right demagogues like Steve Bannon. Well, I guess he's, you know, been indicted, but for the most part, they're going to get away with it, while this layer of like, you know, reactionary everyday Americans are going to be, you know, everyday Americans in quotes, are going to be sent to, you know, prison for 41 months, and the sort of right-wing media grift is just going to continue.
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, that's the Republican playbook 101 with this, especially now. We have a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene coming up where she talks about how basically Democrats have to pay with blood, or you won't actually, sorry, you need to get your freedom back, and the price of blood will essentially need to be paid. I'm paraphrasing, but she talks about blood. The right wingers want to create a violent energy and make sure their base feels like their doom is imminent and it's an existential threat and violence might be necessary up to a point. And then they scurry away once it finally boils over. And it's like, so that's why this lawyer was, I mean, one, he reminds me of Billy Bob Thornton. Did anyone catch that vibe? Can we play it just one more time? Just one more time. It's short, because I just love his energy. Maybe we'll pick up on another, you know, beautiful wrinkle to this answer to the media.
After spending this much time talking to Jacob Chansley and learning about him, what do you think is appropriate accountability for the former president?
What do I think about his what?
What is an appropriate accountability for former President Trump?
Well, if you're asking my opinion, my opinion is meaningless. I will say that I would probably be far more effective over a beer with former President Trump, even if he didn't have a beer, because I understand he doesn't drink beer, but I'd have a beer. And I'd tell him, you know what? You got a few fucking things to do, including clearing this fucking mess up and taking care of a lot of the jackasses that you fucked up because of January 6th. Now, in the meantime, I might talk to him about some other things that I'd agree with him on. But my opinion doesn't mean shit.
Yeah, the thing is, like,
I like to have a beer with that guy.
I think that this guy is going to be central to a lot of people's theories that this whole thing was a false flag. This guy's performance here.
He's pretty much, I think, what a lot of people view as like a trope of a lawyer, to be honest. I think
Exactly. Too much like a character, you'd say. No, but I mean, I joke, but I think there's a good chance that like the sort of arc of this conspiracy ends with, a lot of people who end up going to jail being disavowed by the communities that they were part of as being like infiltrators or like false flags, and like, maybe no one actually went to jail and this was just a way to make President Trump look worse. And this will all happen over the course of like 3 months.
You know what, they did that right away. Actually, they right away portrayed these folks as not being really them, but then at the same time they're promoting Ashley Babbitt, the woman who lost her life breaking through the window to try to get into the House chambers area. They portray her as being in there as a true patriot trying to save the election for Trump. And the interesting thing there is, like, they try to paint her as a sympathetic figure because she was a patriot who lost her life for, but the reality is, she is sort of a figure to feel bad for, but not for the reason they say. She was a brainwashed person who lost her life because they used her. People like Trump and those other people in his orbit used her as a pawn. They used her, just her body, to get what they wanted for their own benefit. She had nothing to win out of what she did, nothing to gain, I should say, out of what she did, everything to lose, and she lost her life over it. And for that, I truly do think, it's sad what happened to her, that a life was taken because these people brainwashed her and used her for their own gain when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose.
No, I agree. I mean, I think you can acknowledge it's sad without being like, I don't know, what's the word, like excusing their actions, because ultimately I think that for the most part, they're like, right-wing media, right-wing demagogues are allowed to do this because it inflames the Republican Party's base. It makes a lot of people rich. And, the human cost of that is presented as though it's always just going to be diffused out amongst the population of like, a few hate crimes here or there, a general feeling of malaise or reactionariness in the culture. But now that it's sort of being shown, just like we talked about earlier, that there's going to be a cost to the people who are participating. And, your racist uncle is going to not only be caught up in January 6th, but maybe die of COVID. A lot more people are, becoming a little bit more edgy about engaging in this kind of rhetoric. And, at the end of the day, like people on the left, like people who are arguing that you shouldn't platform a lot of these people are like not responsible for the outcome of this rampant, this rampant pipeline that exists, on YouTube, this rampant pipeline that exists from like, mainstream pundit circles to far right demagogues like Ben Shapiro. It's not like, we have set back without doing anything. It's just every time you speak out about this pipeline or like any individual part of it, people say you're canceling somebody and you're not allowed to do that.
Yep. Exactly. Awesome Possum, is Michael Flynn going to face accountability for January 6th? One can hope. That guy is a scary, scary individual.
And don't forget that his brother is literally leading, I don't know the exact terminology because I'm not a military guy.
He's a high-up military official.
The Army of the Pacific.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to say some sort of battalion or something. He's leading something in the military.
Just Army in the Pacific, which is like, I think it's just terrifying, right? Like, is the Pacific Ocean, is that important, big? Anyway.
This is great. Risking imagination. QAnon shaman getting a tough sentence is like taking season tickets away from Gorilla Rilla for Gruden's emails. That's the guy that dresses up at the Raiders games. It's really funny.
As a non-sports person, I think I even got that one.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Happy Camper, given the past almost 2 years, it's obvious Joe Rogan used Bernie to give him legitimacy as some unbiased source. I mean, I don't even know if it's that well thought out, honestly. But I mean, let's just be real. At this point, it's a right-wing podcast, and it's probably been that way for a while. I don't listen, but it's explicitly
like
right-wing.
you can tell who Joe Rogan's like listening to by where his takes on like parental leave and this or that. Like the only times he's gonna have people like Bernie or Cornell on is when it's campaign season and he needs to like have some plausible deniability that he's not just in the bag for bosses.
I don't even think he'll do that anymore, though.
I mean, we're also
with Tim Pool and Alex Jones the other day.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how the economics of the Spotify thing are going to work out, but I would imagine he's still going to keep trying to bring people over.
I mean, here's the weird thing, though. Like, he could still have these thoughts and ideas and be that person. But if he used his show to actually book people who disagree with him, who were actual leftists or on the other side, he could still plausibly claim, like, these are my feelings, but I invite anyone on so my audience can hear the discussion. But he doesn't do that, right? He doesn't do that.
He wants to talk to Ben Shapiro. He wants to talk to Ben Shapiro for a fourth time.
Yes, he doesn't want to be challenged.
Like, I don't care if you actually were a right winger and had a show where you actually did what I just said. That would actually be adding something, in my point of view, to the overall discussion, to the discourse. But that's not what happens. What happens is he just brings people down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, he's scared of the confrontation. He's just scared. Like Kyle Kalinske literally tweeted at Rogan, like when he did the whole Michael Roberts thing. Hey, you should have Michael Brooks on, and that's something Rogan could have done, and it's a decision he took not to, and because he's a coward. I think Joe Rogan is a cowardly person.
Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that's like a branding thing. The idea that like what excuses the clear ideology of a platform is that we have this like theoretical diverse plurality of guests or writers or speakers, when in reality, every time someone says it, like it all takes is like some cursory Googling of like their last 10 or 15 articles or episodes to see what that like actual percentage is. And it's like, oh yeah, this is just like to say that you do it so people can't claim to know anything about your ideology that you haven't said out loud. It's all very I think that the best thing about his branding is that he's able to present himself as somehow being outside of that like mainstream pundit like jerk off culture dynamic that he criticizes, but it's like it's all the same. You're getting the same ideas with a slightly edgy. We're getting the same ideas, same people who go in Rogan, right, or in the IDW and are in the New York Times, but like a little bit edgier, a little bit more racist.
I also just want to point out that, and I said this on the show before, that when Tim Pool got angry at Sam Seder for pulling that stunt on Steven Crowder, he went on to say that he knows of a major podcast. This is not verbatim, but he knows of a major show that won't book Sam. He's on a blacklist there, and there is no doubt on my mind that that's the Joe Rogan show.
Absolutely.
Because Crowder
said it too. Crowder said, this is why Joe Rogan.
Crowder said that. I forgot about that. Yeah, Crowder did say that. Right. So exactly. I mean, this is the guy. This is the brave truth teller, right? Afraid to talk to comedian Sam Seder, and that's how they categorize him.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe someday we'll find Rogan will find a courage supplement, and he'll be able to have a conversation with somebody that knows what the fuck he's talking about.
I mean, right-wing ideology is just so flimsy, even when it's like kind of thought out by people who spend a lot of time thinking it out, that to expose yourself to someone who is like, is not going to give you the most generous berth is just to, consign yourself to being embarrassed. And they don't want to do that.
Jeremy F. Brandon, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for tonight's United States of Al episode? Apparently, the episode is called College.
Yes, on this episode, Al goes back to community college. I think he takes a psychology course, and so like his more traditional Afghani views about like talking about your feelings are gonna butt heads with, I guess, a more hippy dippy teacher. The last few episodes have been a little bit boring because they've been a little unfocused. So I'm hoping that this conflict kind of goes somewhere. Although 2 episodes ago he found out the girl he was dating was like polyamorous, so that was the whole thing.
Oh wow, that must have bumped up against his his past and his values, right? That's the whole.
His values are like the show is very lazy, like only sitcoms can be, where like everyone's like values shift for whatever the plot of the episode is. So sometimes he's like pro therapy, sometimes he's anti therapy, sometimes like he's pro like taking disability from the VA, sometimes he's against it, sometimes like the sister is like smart and sometimes she's like dumb. It's a whole thing. You know, Dean Norris is looking great though. He's never aged in his face, but he gets like rounder as he gets older. I appreciate that.
Antisocial socialist. Happy Thursday. I was stuck in traffic yesterday and let someone merge in front of me. Of course, they took their sweet time doing so, and without thinking, I said, "Gotta be quick, Martha," to myself in the car. I completely blame Emma for this being in my vernacular now. I know it's like a beautiful, beautiful little quote from Trump. Really underrated. All-time favorite of mine. All right, let's take a call, Matt, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's go to the phones. Hold on, I've lost the phone window. Here we go. 401. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
This is you. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Yep.
Oh my goodness. Hi, I'm Andy. I'm calling from here in New York City.
Hey, Andy from here in New York City.
Formerly from Rhode Island.
Is this your first time calling in? Because you sound shocked you got through.
Yes, I am. This is my first time calling in.
I love it. I love when new callers get on.
Well, no, it's this is awesome. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. What would you like to talk about?
Well, you guys just got finished talking about Joe Rogan, but I actually had a question for you guys about Joe Rogan.
That's perfect. Perfect segue.
Yeah, great. So here's a take that I will not name the source just because, you know, it doesn't really matter where it came from. Someone else in the leftist sphere kind of said something along the lines of, oh, well, you know, the media has gotten a little too fond of, you know, criticizing Joe Rogan and making him out to be this super right-wing figure when sometimes
Glenn Greenwald? You talking about Glenn Greenwald?
You guys were just talking about.
You talking about Glenn Greenwald?
I'm sure he said, I'm not even talking.
Are you talking about Kyle?
Let's say this. We don't, like you said, but this is they sent.
Yeah, I'm not trying to. You guys can start your own beef. I'm not going to do it for you.
All right.
But anyway, and this idea that like, oh, but sometimes he says good things, right? Like, and we should cover the good things so that we can say to his audience, hey, we agree with this guy. So listen to I don't know what the logical conclusion of it is.
What
but
is
it's
he?
this idea.
What does he even agree with on? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are the good things? Like, Joe Rogan also says the sky is blue.
Well,
I mean,
here's an example. Here's an example that just here's an example that just happened that everyone's like kind of going off about. That he had Snoop Dogg on, and he said, oh, you know, people don't realize they're being divided by race and all this other stuff, and we're really divided by his class, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, Sagar and Jetty is like, oh my, look at this Joe Rogan doing the thing, right? And and it's bullshit because like a week ago, Joe Rogan was saying, this is America, you got to work. Parental leave is for pussies.
Yeah.
And that's who Joe Rogan, and
we are also divided by race too. There also is racism. It's just to deny that is fucking bullshit.
Right. But like the thing, like anyway, somebody else can go on. I forgot what I was going to say.
You know, it's okay. Keep going.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, you know, I just love this framing that's been built up for the guy. I used to be a fan of his show. You know, I came for the advocacy towards psychedelics. I left from the transphobia. Mm-hmm. You know, it's got to be too much, right? But I love this vision, and I used to buy into this too. That Joe Rogan's just this like, you know, crazy old man babbling on a hill, and we have to like, you know, come over to him and say, wise old sage, what do you have to say today? And today he'll be like, well, I'm not so sure that people should be getting parental leave. You got to work in this country. And then the next day he'll be like, oh, you know, maybe I'll vote for Bernie. And then we have to be like, thank you, Mr. Wise Sage. Like, I don't, how do you even counter that narrative though?
That's really a good way of putting it. Honestly, it is amazing that like people, it's like the crypto people begging Elon Musk to plug their scam coin in his mentions every time he tweets. It's like you're begging for validation from your daddy.
I mean, I also feel like, oh, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, no.
Go ahead,
sorry.
Brandon.
No, I was going to say, I also feel like, people have developed this very irrational feeling that they're being held hostage by people with large platforms, even if they're not actively trying to get on those platforms. Like, you have to engage in this relationship with them where like you consume all of their content so you can sort it into like the good and the bad. Like, what is like Matty Iglesias saying good this week? What is he saying bad this week? Because you're not allowed to disengage from that person's content because, again, we have a very, very weird, maybe content creation or content creator oriented like sphere of the internet. So like to disengage and to just like, it's not for me, is kind of like a taboo. Instead, you should be dedicating your life to like becoming a biographer of Joe Rogan's television or whatever, his podcast. It's ultimately just not that serious. Like, you can critique Joe Rogan's show, like the arc of it, without watching every episode, because like you said, we know the ratio of demagogues to like Cornel West that he has on. It's very minuscule. It's like, it's just trying to get people so invested in the, you're watching the show all the time, you're like reading the articles from the New York Times all the time. And that's the thing I would highlight, that like this mentality that people espouse about Joe Rogan is the same that they espouse about the Bill Maher show. It's the same that they espouse about the New York Times. It's the same they espouse about like any outlet or person that could theoretically platform another content creator, because there is a level of like, social profession bias towards like, well, going on the Joe Rogan show would promote me to a point that would elevate me out in my personal career. And isn't that just also a step for, equality? And so I think you got to be careful of letting people convince you that you have to become a fan of somebody in order to be a critic of them too, because ultimately then you just find yourself investing your time to like, I don't know, like what, being able to get a gotcha on another like Joe Rogan fan. Like, they're not interested in that either. It's like, it's also very like, it's very driven towards getting you to consume something. Even like that should be like the sign that it's not really a good, a good vehicle for like actually changing or like moving people from a position.
And I would say like, don't worry about like what to find the better words that are going to help you spread this message about Joe Rogan, because the only thing that's going to do that is time, because Joe Rogan is not going to get better. He's only going to get worse and more into this right-wing bullshit, because he did a whole bunch of irresponsible broadcasting during a pandemic that frankly probably got a bunch of people killed in a way that he can't ever really confront in a public way. Like the way he's saying ivermectin was a perfect prophylactic with the Brett Weinstein. Like he can't. He's like Alex Jones now, right? Like that's why like it wasn't a surprise to me to see him hanging out with Alex Jones, is because he made his bed now, and it's only going to become more and more apparent.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much for calling in.
If he's smart, he just keep talking.
Thank you very much. I appreciate what you guys do. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
Also,
right.
I also want to say I do think that if Cornel West or Bernie Sanders ever gets invited, or anyone like that gets invited back to Joe Rogan's show, I do still think there's value in that. Especially now where it's quite clear who his audience is. So I don't think they're bringing anyone to him. Anyone that they're able to get out of there or to think differently at the very least that what Rogan is pushing and saying is worth it in my view.
No, I agree. I think he does. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go, Brandon.
I think there's like a space between like, you should never go on to the platform in a place where like, oh, well, you're exposing ideas to different people who would otherwise not hear them. Because, the only people, like you can still condemn going on the platform if there are exceptions. It's just that, when people try to speak to the exception, it always sounds like but what if I were invited? Wouldn't it be so important for me to go on? It's like, sometimes you have to like at least be able to concede, like, it's not so important to you, random comedian, to go on Joe Rogan or Fox News as it is for like Cornel West or Bernie Sanders. And that's just an ego thing. Like, if it's okay for one person, it has to be okay for everybody. Otherwise, like, are you saying my career is not as important as like so-and-so's, and I guess for the struggle or whatever?
Let's take another call, Matt.
Sure. Let's take this call right here. 913. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi guys, my name is Philip. I'm calling from St. Louis.
Hey, Philip from St. Louis. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I got one thing for Emma and then one thing for you, Matt, here. Emma, I looked up your false idol, Aaron Rodgers, and he comes from a family of chiropractors, so I don't know if that might be influencing his anti-vax kind of
he's genetically
background here. Just
well, you know, the thing
yeah,
that's so interesting. Back to the mic. Oh, good. So that's the one thing. So like he doesn't really, you know, engage with his family anymore because they're of their fundamentalist kind of Christian views, but he still can't escape the chiropractor in him.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty telling when I looked up on his Wikipedia, because I was like, my first assumption was like, oh, he's, you know, from California, maybe he is in that kind of health and wellness hippy dippy kind of crew, and
he's in that too.
Yeah, and when I saw his dad was a chiropractor, I was like, it makes so much more sense.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that tidbit.
No, you're good. And then for Binder, this is kind of more the reason why I'm asking you is it's up your kind of rabbit hole here. With regards to like QAnon and stuff, have you noticed more of like kind of, because with regards to vigilantism as well, like people, these like pedophile trackers and hunters, because there was one kind of that it's made a little bit of news around here where this guy tried to create his own pedophile hunting tracking group, and weirdly enough, he got arrested a couple months ago because I guess he was, you know, threatening people and like he was being abusive to women, and weirdly enough, they were all, you know, 18, 19 years old as well, and that kind of, you know, close to that underage range. But I didn't know if that was a trend you've been seeing kind of nationwide, or at least larger than just my like one little incident here.
Right. I mean, it's even wider than that. I think like, I mean, you last summer, especially when they were using like the Save the Children branding to try to spread that part of QAnon to the masses, and it worked. You had in life, real world rallies, mostly of like you know, middle-aged women holding up Save the Children signs to bring awareness to child trafficking and what's going on in that world, when really they were just pushing QAnon conspiracy theories. I mean, it's certainly something. There's definitely something there, and you even have shady organizations. There's one, I can't remember the name. They were involved with that. That QAnon believing former WWE referee was big in pushing them. They were an organization, or they are an organization that basically used QAnon to get more eyeballs on like what they say is like they're saving the children. They're you know, tracking child traffickers when they have a lot of sketchy dealings and promoting wins where they really weren't any wins there for them. Yeah, there's a lot of that for sure. And I can't speak to anyone specifically, but there's definitely a lot of projection too in that world, in terms of the people searching to fight for the child traffickers or fighting the child traffickers ending up being pedophiles themselves.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it was to no shock there. And yeah, that was used a lot because he was getting spread around all locally, you know, on like Facebook and stuff, using that Save the Children thing. And then, like I said, yeah, when he got arrested for basically, and he wasn't even like doing child trafficking. He was trying to kind of like entrap people more or less by like pretending he was like a 14-year-old. And then he would just basically go and publicly shame him and try to citizens arrest people, and even the police were like, you got to the police's credit for this was, they were like, you can't do this, like this is all illegal and that sort of stuff there. So
right. To catch a predator really messed with a whole generation of people, I think. I mean,
that's actually my point too. I was going to say, you know, I think, you know, it can't be understated that we've had a lot of moral panic surrounding like this nebulous threat of like child abduction, you know, and they've always been used to like condemn a problematic, as per Moral Panics, condemn a problematic, population or subpopulation of our culture. We had like the gender panics and like the gay, male panic of the 70s, that, with the satanic panic and the babysitter stuff that was going around. But this sort of root of like, these outside un-American, non-white forces usually are going to come and abduct your children is a through line throughout our culture, like, to be used as a way to rile up, that suburban base that we idolize so much in our politics.
And also, it should be mentioned that a lot of these, like, evil child trafficking rings out there, stealing children off the streets, the majority of cases involving what is classified as child trafficking end up being one of the parents who were involved in like a divorce case with the other parent taking the child, and the child's the danger is through the legal system, not that the parent is going to physically harm the child.
That's not the plot of Taken, though, and it's certainly not the plot of any Lifetime movies I've watched, because that would be acknowledging like the true face of crime in America is someone not like roving bands of Black people or like Islamic terrorist organizations or stuff like that. That'd just be like, it'd be just our general maldistribution of resources and alienation from one another, and people aren't ready for that kind of that's Taken 4. That's what I'm trying to say.
And when it comes to child like sex trafficking, the majority of the times too, it's unfortunately a child from a broken home who leaves their home themselves and goes out into the streets to do this so they can survive. It's not like they're being stolen off the streets and forced into it. I mean, again, that does happen, but the vast majority of child sex trafficking is a child going off on their own to leave a bad situation at home, and they feel like they need to do this to exist, survive.
Appreciate the call, Philip. Thank you.
Yep. Brady's the GOAT, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I know now. I don't even know how I could deny last season. Yeah, it's just nuts.
It's more football talk, or is there a different sport happening now?
That's Brady is in football. Yes.
I'm sure there are other Bradys.
Yeah.
I've seen too many videos of like rhetorical questions or like trap questions being asked for me to just answer anything without, getting clarification.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was not leading you down the trap, but maybe I will next episode when you're least expecting it.
Owning Brandon on sports.
Yeah, I want.
I'm always least expecting it, so you can go.
I mean, and then you can own me on United States Val, right?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I have speaking of photographic memories of bad content, I guess I'm not one to cast stones.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, that was a bit of a stone, but sure.
I meant about the Joe Rogan stuff, not about.
All right, let's do some clips. I gotta get to my sound sheet. You guys have any?
Do you want to do this? I heard this the other day, and I didn't know what to expect going into it. But this Lauren Boebert clip really went even above what I was expecting. Like,
Thank you for the reminder. Thank you.
I have not heard this one yet. I've only heard stories of it, so I'm excited for live reactions.
If she somehow gets away without any reprimand or consequence for what she said on the House floor here, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. But that would be, to me, a real, like, the idea that Gosar gets it for that video, which is obviously good. But she wouldn't get it for basically just saying the same things, but audibly instead of visually. Like, this is over the top.
Yeah. So I guess with that said, let's watch it.
Since the speaker has designated the floor to discuss members' inappropriate actions, shall we? The Jihad Squad member from Minnesota has paid her husband, and not her brother husband, the other one, over $1 million in campaign funds. This member is allowed on the Foreign Affairs Committee while praising terrorists. A Democrat chairwoman incited further violence in the streets outside of a courthouse. And then the cherry on top. My colleague and 3-month presidential candidate from California, who is on the Intelligence Committee, slept with Fang Fang, a Chinese spy. Let me say that again. A member of Congress who receives classified briefings was sleeping with the enemy. This is unacceptable, and this would never be.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Florida.
So the first person she's referring to there is obviously Ilhan Omar. The last person she's referring to is Eric Swalwell. And who is the member of Congress that she's saying incited violence? Is that Maxine Waters? Okay. So Ilhan Omar responded to her and said, "Luckily, my dad raised me right. Otherwise, I might have gone to the floor to talk about how this insurrectionist who sleeps with a pervert." Lauren Boebert's husband was here we go. Lauren Boebert's husband has a charge for indecently exposing himself at a bowling alley while she was there. I am grateful I was raised to be a decent human and not a deprived, I think she meant depraved person who shamelessly defecates and defiles the House of Representatives. Praise God. So the Jihad Squad, obviously, I don't even want to say it, but she says it. Super racist.
Yeah, I mean, the brother thing is just like the birtherism, but they can.
Yeah, it's a crazy conspiracy theory with no bearing in reality. In fact,
that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
because
it came from some basically investigation by a Republican representative in Minnesota.
Republican operatives hiring private eyes to go allegedly try to connect DNA evidence, which I would just say not admissible in court with when you have Republican hacks saying like, "Oh, I got this DNA and it proves a family connection." There's lies.
And wasn't the guy who investigated her that he was found to have
he's in legal trouble of his own right now.
Criminal wrongdoing, and so that's where it originated from. And then, but that's all you need. Republicans can call it, say it's fact too. Same with the Swalwell thing, although there's a little bit more there, but it doesn't seem like that has any legs either. And then, of course, the Maxine Waters thing is garbage as well. Lots of lies.
I think that Ilhan Omar should have like gotten a bunch of people who got like dysentery from Lauren Boebert's restaurant to give testimony on like the House Representative floor. I think that'd be fun, like a fun way to get back at her. Just like have them describe like what eating at Shooters is like, and you know.
Yeah. Like when Trump had all of the women who had accused Bill Clinton of like when the tape came out, the Access Hollywood tape, he just responded with the line of women who all had things to say about Bill Clinton. We need that from Ilhan Omar. She needs to take a troll job page out of Trump's book.
Also, the Swalwell thing, it should be said that wasn't he the one who even alerted the authorities about this woman's that they claim he slept with and had relations with. He's the one who warned them that this Chinese spy is coming after members of Congress. Like he's the one who alerted them.
Yeah, those are the details that are omitted if you want to pretend like it is a massively scandalous story on par with treason. Yeah,
the point of that, I mean, the fact that that's like there was a spy, that's why it's closer to reality than this married her brother thing. I mean, and then she calls it the Jihad Squad, right? Like, I just, the idea that Ilhan Omar has to deal with this kind of unhinged Islamophobia and racism on a daily basis, and that's what this is. It's maddening. Yeah.
Unless she's trying to say that Swalwell is quite the player, and after having his relations with this woman, he decided to get her out of his life by just saying she's a Chinese.
It's like hit it and quit it.
Support this lady.
Not hit it and quit it. Hit it and imprison it.
Right. Oh God, these people, my God. I mean, wasn't even well delivered, and she's the allegedly the daughter of her estranged father, Sweet Stan Lane, the former professional wrestler. Unbelievable.
I mean, it just really goes to show you that like what people say about, you know, whatever happened to the Tea Party is true. Like it just became the Republican Party's like representatives. Like those Tea Party activists who were spreading like Obama conservative memes where he was like, you know, Michelle Obama was actually a man, or like he was, you know, actually a Kenyan Muslim Islamist terrorist. Like they just eventually continued to be a bigger and more influential part of the Republican Party's just base, and like they're legislators, and you know, even if they do censor her, like that's just part of the process now, like of getting canceled and then claiming you're canceled while like on every television show until people are forced to kind of either apologize to you or double down, which the Democrats, they tend to apologize.
Trump is the king of this. This has been like cemented forever in the Republicans. He was the number one birther. That's how he reemerged on the political scene after flirting with running like decades before. He got his new branding in the Republican base by claiming that Obama was not born in the United States. So it makes total sense that these conspiracy theories that are based in racism are going to continue, and they're incentivized to keep it up. Bo Bird and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the whole gang. All right, let's take one final call, Matt.
Sure, let's do it. Let's go to the phones. Here, this looks like a different number. Trying to get new people on so we don't hear from the same voices. 479, although I could be wrong and this could be a regular. Who knows? Let's see. 479.
You are the final call of the day, 479.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is the Admiral.
The Admiral. Have you ever called into the show before?
No, I never have, actually.
Perfect. Exactly what I wanted. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, there were a couple things. I don't know if you guys saw that in the Rittenhouse trial, the judge banned MSNBC.
An MSNBC reporter because they're
I think they flat out banned the MSNBC in the any representative period. I did see that.
Because they were accused of following the jury, the bust with the jurors in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. Also, I had a question for Emma. I know we talked about sports a little bit, but we also talked about Life of Al or United States of Al. So
yeah,
I was just curious where you get this Baker Mayfield being conservative from.
Oh, well, I mean, Matt and I have talked about this. Maybe off air, they all blend together. But he posted an anti-defund the police
a pro-Prop A thing for Austin, Texas, which was basically like a proposition that would force the hiring of more police officers, even more than the police departments said they wanted. And he posed some fear-mongering stuff about crime. That's where I took his ideology from.
But I mean, before that, I did not have that inclination. I kind of thought, I liked that he was, I like when quarterbacks kind of speak their minds, because sometimes, in New York, we've had a white, silent robot quarterback for as long as I can remember. But, Mayfield I'm becoming disillusioned with him a little bit. I mean, I have all these false idols. I'm rethinking all of my renegade quarterback worship with Aaron Rodgers becoming, an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, I just was curious because, I've seen his support for BLM and, with the what was it, Julius Jones? I feel like he's just a shit lib. I don't feel like he's conservative.
All right.
I'm not a fan of him or anything. I was just curious. I didn't see.
The cop thing was the cop crime thing was the only thing that I saw, frankly. And I think it's good that they shared positive messages about Black Lives Matter. Although, when I see white NFL players do that, I'm like, that's kind of you're going to really piss off a lot of your teammates if you say nothing during that entire time.
Yeah, no, and it depends on what you say. I mean, Brady barely said anything. It also, it depends on if there were some, there are degrees to it. But maybe
he's winnable, or maybe we can bring him back from the whoever got in his ear about the prop bay.
Yeah, and perhaps you were right. I was wrong to make that assumption about Mayfield based on that one post, right? Maybe he was just being mindless about it. But what I do think is Brown should not give him a second contract. I do not think he's very good.
Particularly,
wow, that's crazy. My first call and I win in a debate against you. That's crazy.
Wow, shots fired.
No, I was also going to say, no, I'm serious.
Go on.
Go on.
No, I mean, he does not have a natural motion. He needs every part of his body to throw the ball as hard as he can, and he's not accurate.
Yeah. No, I'm not a fan of him at all. I just was curious where that came from. But also, I was going to say, is it a secret who's going to be on the show tomorrow?
No, because I saw she tweeted it out, but I won't be on the show tomorrow. all of a sudden because I have to go to a funeral.
She announced it, but Jamie Peck.
Ooh, I just want to point out, not to create any rumors or gossip or anything, but interesting that Emma just happens to have something come up when Jamie's coming back to the show.
Matt, I have to go to a funeral. I have to go to a funeral, Matt. Do you want to keep making a joke about that?
No.
But yeah, Jamie and her co-host, I can't remember his name from Everybody Loves Communism, Jorge. So that will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Triumphant return.
If I had the soundboard, I would have been doing. I'm bummed I'm going to miss that. There we go. Perfect.
I just want to be clear. I'm
That's all I
making the
had.
joke to mock those rumors and gossip. Just want to be clear. Don't want to create anything.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think you're relishing in the pain that my loved ones are experiencing, and it's just like, that's obviously what's going down.
Edgelord Matt once again taking things too far.
Yeah, I should have expected it. All right, guys, let's. I didn't even realize it's 2:28. We are going to read some IMs and get out of here. Thank you, final caller of the day. Get me to talk about Baker Mayfield. Champagne Commie. Society is committing the same crime when it murders someone under the name of justice. First, there was one person murdered, and now there are two. All punishment, in fact, is nothing but revenge. Sending them to rot in a cage just turns them into harder criminals when in reality criminals should be sent to a psychiatric hospital to be treated. Something has gone terribly wrong in their psychology. We need an intelligent and compassionate approach to crime, not barbarism.
Yeah, I mean,
futile.
I don't think punishment interests me at all in terms of criminal justice. I think the only reason to cage a human being is if you absolutely need to protect other human beings from them, and we absolutely do. And particularly, for killing people at no point, I think do you kill somebody with the law?
Right.
It's also just not effective at what people claim its stated goal is, which is not to quote unquote be punitive, but instead to encourage more lawful behavior in society. But we know, that's obviously just a mask for the prison industrial complex. But, ideally more people will become prison abolitionists as we move forward in society, and they become more aware of the, horrors of our prison state.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember, people. Who was the Norwegian mass
Breivik.
murderer? Breivik.
Anders Breivik.
He's gonna serve life in prison, but I remember one of my first breaks seeing some people on the left showing the Norwegian prisons and how they look like dorm rooms, and there's TVs and Xboxes and stuff, and how horrible that was, or even some people on the left arguing that. I'm like, really, is it though? I mean, basically, if we're trying to limit harm for society, and you think this person's not safe enough to be in society, and there are some, but a very, very small percentage of people where that's the case, I don't really care where they're housed.
Yeah, I mean, well,
or if their bed's cozy.
In Breivik's case, he wasn't even given a life sentence. He's given a sentence that's 20 years and then reappraised.
But then they renew it.
Right,
Not.
exactly.
He's not coming out.
Absolutely.
That's my point.
Right,
it was just misreported. People were like, "Oh, he's only getting 20 years, and look how nice his prison cell is."
Right, exactly, and that entire thing, and you post the images of the prison cell, and you have people in America being like, "I'm going to go to Norway to commit a crime because that looks great," right? That's another underline why we treat prisoners so bad, is because we need to treat them worse than poor people here.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was gonna say, people took the wrong thing from that. Obviously our dorm rooms look like prisons. And that's a way more harsh thing to realize, that America is so low down there that other prisons, in countries that we would consider ourselves to be better than, are reminiscent of our dorm rooms. But yeah, I agree with, to Emma's point, and this also, I guess, to the point about the, people who pro support of the police. It's just, it's hard to understate how much of our, sense of law and justice and what keeps the social order together is this violent militaristic police and overreaching oppressive prison state. And the idea that we wouldn't have that, but something even as still a prison by what we would consider prison standards as Norway would just be unable to deal with the rampant crime that we believe exists here, which is really just there are brown people.
Yeah. I wish we had, I mean, we don't have the time to talk about this, but people look up Charlie Munger's dorm design, which a few weeks ago was a big controversy. Right. There was an attempt to design a dorm at some California school where essentially it was no windows for the students.
Artificial light from light bulbs.
Yeah, USCB. It was a way to just maximize the number of students that you could warehouse in a dorm, and a lot of the rooms wouldn't have windows, etc. And they were incredibly small. It's
the woke architects started resigning because they thought it was a crime against humanity.
Yes, exactly.
They thought it was a human rights violation.
Damn. Can you imagine you get randomly assigned at UCSB and that's your dorm? I don't know. Not good. All right, let's read like 10 more IMs and then we're gonna get out of here. Actually, maybe more like 5. 10's a lot, sorry. Emma's vegan yard sign. Come on, old Matt. Stanling was not a good promo. It was just less noticeable because he had beautiful Bobby Eaton by his side.
That's true. That is correct.
Bourbon socialist. These fucking freaks are going to get Ilhan Omar killed. Omar's courage cannot be understated for the amount of vitriol she gets from her own colleagues in the House, much less from the hogs who listen to people like Boebert.
That's why she needs that Gundam.
And that's the purpose of stochastic terrorism. So just foment hatred against one person so that, the probability of random violence happening against them, it just increases and increases.
Well, there's an IM really right about that now from white communists. I can't say the word. Stochastic terrorism is an evolution of terrorism that attempts, like terrorist cells, to execute terrorism with deniability. They flood society with messages of violence and dehumanization, then sit back for the inevitable violent mobilization of some people. It's random but certain, like COVID. It's often combined with the just jokes ploy. Pete Simi is currently schooling the Charlottesville trial of militant white supremacists on this technique. Americans recognize it when it's ISIS, but white supremacists, not so much.
Yeah. Also, the reason why we don't recognize it is because it often draws on larger narratives that are being made about those populations anyway, which is, why we have this Islamophobia has been fomented in our society at various levels since, we made the war in Iraq and war in Afghanistan our biggest accomplishment / shame over the past 20 years.
Right.
All right. Why it finds purchase.
2 more. JJ Cool. Joe is a coward for never having Michael on. Joe did say last week that he's flexible enough that he could fillet himself. He quickly added that he never does, though.
I disagree. He does it on his show every week.
Yeah,
and they talk about how they don't talk about campus culture that much or whatever.
Yeah, and he has all his guests do it too.
And the final IM of the day, trash weed. Today's guest painted a dark and eye-opening picture. However, his resistance to decriminalization is sus. It seems there are only 2 ways forward for drug policy: mass legalization and therefore standardization in order to sift out fentanyl from everything else, or total police state. I agree. I would love if, again, what I said in the interview, I understand maybe holding off on something like fentanyl, or like something like meth, as we're trying to, kind of figure out that situation based on especially the dark picture that he painted. But, we got to decriminalize cocaine, ketamine, whatever, LSD, shrooms, weed, most drugs that I can think of. That should be done tomorrow. That's my opinion. All right, folks. Matt, Brandon, Matt, and Bradley, thank you guys so much for the show today. Wonderful show. I won't be here tomorrow, and also I'm moving on Monday.
Where are you moving?
I'm just moving apartments. I'm just moving to a different apartment, in the area. So still in Brooklyn. I just changing.
Thought maybe I have a new neighbor in Queens.
No, not in Queens. Still in Brooklyn. See you guys I will see you on Tuesday then. So, but the gang will see you tomorrow. Bye.
But me and Brandon won't. So really, you're just seeing Matt and.
I got turned around.
Just have to get the last word in there.
Bye. That's it.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.